Mira Business FM, your daily guide to the markets, money, and more.
This is the Morning Drive here at Mira Business FM with me, Tim Elliott. You can be with us in a number of different ways, should you so wish. The website, mirabusiness.fm, YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, Dailymotion, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, X. There are more. Email us. Very simple. Contact us at info@mira.fm. That's the email address. You can also WhatsApp us, whatsapp.mira.fm. And if you can give us a subscribe or a thumbs up or a hello, it's always much appreciated. Now, legal matters on the program this morning, and it's employment that we're taking a look at. Specifically, a freelancer's roadmap, really, legal structures, visas, compliance in the UAE. Kind of everything you need to know if you're thinking about starting your own side hustle. That's kind of the modern vernacular, I think, here in the Emirates. Raymond Kisswany is a partner at Davidson & Co., and he is back in the studio. Good to see you.
Very good to see you again. I decided to wear my actual Clark Kent glasses because last time apparently a lot of your viewers were saying that I had a Clark Kent thing going.
You do have a bit of a Clark Kent thing. We didn't say that to you at the time. We only did it behind your back.
No, exactly. But the glasses I was wearing last time, I call them my professor glasses. Those are the glasses I wear when I'm trying to look smart.
Right.
So,
okay. What are you going for?
So I went with the full Clark Kent. You know, I figured let's give the viewers what they want.
I think that's the way to go. That's the way forward, Raymond. So you're not going to run off at any point and go round in a phone box really fast.
It really depends if there's a crashing train or anything
we
happening.
Need to send the world backwards again.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
I might.
There are going to be more Superman gags this hour. I can feel it. Look, it's good to see you. We're going to spend the next kind of 30, 40 minutes or so going over the details that if you want to freelance in this country, the things you need to know, but that you need to know so that you're fully compliant. Now, the UAE has strongly, I think, encouraged a move away from informal freelancing. And, consequently, I think freelancing has boomed. I know loads of people. I'm a freelancer myself as well. Formalization is mandatory. For an individual starting today, let me ask you this to start with. What's the single most compliant pathway to legally live and work as a freelancer? And also, just outline why you should avoid the informal setup thing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the most sort of compliant, safest route that you can take is really just three simple things. It's number one, making sure that you have a freelance license, link that to your UAE visa,
right,
and carry out all the business activities strictly through that license structure and for what the license entails. Kind of as you alluded to, operating informally, having it as just a quote unquote side hustle and treating it that way has been overlooked, but those days are long gone. There are formal ways, and that's the formal pathway to it. So you really have to treat the freelancing gig, whether side hustle, as an actual business. Don't treat it as some sort of hobby. If you don't, then you really expose yourself to fines, difficulty renewing your actual visa. There's a whole issues with corporate tax, and you can even be facing labor penalties. So the message is very clear. You can freelance. It's encouraged for you to do so, but there's only the formal pathway.
One of the things we won't do today, or not in any great detail, is look at all the different forms of license and the different free zones. But we'll look at, we'll take kind of a broad view. I think that's the best thing. Otherwise, we'll be here till next Tuesday, and your cape will need a wash or something. But just very quickly, before we get on to the differences between, permits and licenses, and we need to differentiate between those two. The kinds of freelance activities that are permitted, or not permitted as well. But I mean, freelancing covers it's almost anything, isn't it, really? It covers a whole gamut of different business opportunities.
It does. And there's differences between permits and licenses. And a bit like when we talked about last week, the UAE is a bit of a special creature in the sense that we've got different Emirates, you've got mainland, free zones, etc. So each one sort of depends on which one you go for. So kind of trying to understand we can kind of break it down into almost two different pathways, if you will. There's the permits that are issued by the Ministry of Human Resources,
Right.
and those are effectively recognized by the mainland structure, the mainland labor system. That allows you to work effectively as a freelancer and independent contractor across the UAE. And it's excellent if most of your clients, your customers, are going to be mainland companies.
Yeah.
The other one is through a free zone. So that would be issued by the specific free zone, whether it's, for example, DMCC or Rack Easy, etc. There you operate as an establishment in the free zone. That gives you a trade license that you can usually sponsor yourself through, and the activities have to match what the free zone is allowing you to do.
Okay, so the point isn't it that you need to really carefully read the fine print. I mean, when I applied for my license, for example, which is an economic department license, I was looking at it thinking, well, can I do all the things I want to do, which is really production, podcasts, presenting, that kind of thing. So I called them. And, there wasn't at that time, this is a few years ago, not that long ago, but there wasn't a specific podcast license or broadcast freelance license, but there were a number of things that fit the bill. So I called them and they talked me through it and said, well, look, this is this. And I said, well, can I do this? And they said, yes, you can do this, but what about this license? Maybe this is more appropriate for you. So it's not, it was a very kind of approachable thing, and it was all done over the phone. And then I paid online and, Robert is your father's brother, or Bob's your uncle, as some people might say.
Thank you, man. As well.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it pays to do the research so that 100%. Because as you've said, compliance is really important.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I think a lot of people somewhat fail to realize, especially if you're coming from what we call as a common law jurisdiction, for example, the UK, US, etc., where within the UAE you have specific business activities that you get licensed for.
Yes.
So if you are not licensed for that business activity, you cannot do something else.
Yep.
And the example that you just gave is a perfect one in the sense that regulators, be it the DEG, be it the free zone, are really approachable, and it's sort of a working system of, it's a bit what we talked about last week of, this is what I'm trying to do, how do I fit it into the puzzle system that is the trade license that I'm going to get.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not that it's bureaucratically difficult. It's just very difficult for, I guess, any government to narrow down what lots of us do, because lots of us do different things.
Exactly.
So, and that's really the point of doing it. The other thing, and you kind of pointed to this a few minutes ago, is the potential trigger for tax, because there's a 1 million dirham annual revenue threshold, which is kind of critical for some freelancers. What happens if a freelancer crosses this threshold? Do you start paying tax immediately? Do you need to register? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think this is a really confusing point for a lot of people.
It is, yeah.
Crossing that 1 million dirham in revenue, it triggers mandatory corporate tax registration.
Yes.
And what I have to mean is that does not, NOT, mean that you have to start paying tax immediately. If you exceed if you exceeded the 1 million dirham in revenue in 2024, your registration deadline for corporate tax was the 31st of March 2025, so just a few months ago. Mm-hmm. Missing that deadline leads to a fine of up to 10,000 dirhams. So I really hope that everybody did that. But it's really important that 1 million dirham is for registration, not for taxable income.
Right. Okay. What about taxable profit versus revenue then? There are lots of freelancers who, I guess, feel a little bit of trepidation, maybe even fear at the thought of, corporate tax, which is what, 9%?
Yeah.
Can you explain the the way it works in terms of the tax-free profit threshold, which is just what, $100,000, 375,000 dirhams. Give us a simple example so that we can clarify that, or make it even clearer that the tax is on profit above that level, not the first 375,000. That's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, there's a little bit of a misnomer when people hear these numbers. And the UAE system is very tax friendly, especially for freelancers, and this is what we often fail to realize. So the first 375,000 dirhams of taxable profit is 0%. So you don't pay any tax on that.
Right.
You only profits above that threshold are taxed at 9%. So a really example. So let's say that you have revenue of 1 million dirhams, or let's say that you have 1 million dirhams. You have expenses of 500,000 dirhams. So you've made a profit of 500,000 dirhams.
Right.
So you're paying 9% only on the portion above 375,000. So it's 9% of 125,000, which is just over 11,000 dirhams. So basically, you've made a profit of 500,000 dirhams. You're paying tax of just over 11,000 dirhams. So the UAE is taxing revenue. It is not taxing revenue. It's only taxing profit above 375,000, and that's not counting your legitimate expenses.
Okay, it's pretty straightforward, really. So let's talk a little bit about deductibles. The most common legitimate kind of business expenses a UAE freelancer can deduct to lower their taxable profit. What's the golden rule for maintaining, and I think this is so important, maintaining your financial records?
Yeah, exactly. Freelancers can deduct any expense that what is termed legally as wholly and exclusively related to the business.
Right.
So, common examples of that would be, for example, your laptop, your camera, your lighting, your microphones, if you're doing these kind of activities, with those being related to the business. Any software subscriptions, so your Microsoft, Adobe, etc., if you're working within that. Any marketing or advertising that you're doing for the business. If you're traveling for client work, that's actual business travel, not just going to the Maldives. Unless you've got clients there that you're doing. Any sort of working space rent, even if you're sort of going to a shared office, for example, or shared working. Your mobile and internet costs that are related to the business. And also
the license cost as well, I guess, as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Your fee.
And also any professional services that you use, accounting, legal. So your legal expenses. So anything really that is related to the business. The golden rule is really, if you can't prove it through documentation, i.e. invoicing, receipts, don't deduct it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. There's also a question, isn't there, of VAT registration as well, I suppose. Is that something that freelancers should be thinking about?
Yeah, of course. If you're operating, which, I mean, most of the services probably that fall within freelancing are VAT. So if you're having to charge VAT, definitely register, because you'd be able to claim these back as well.
Okay. Let's talk about contract essentials. I mean, intellectual property. First of all, protecting intellectual property is vital for a designer, a developer, whoever, really. What's the one clause that has to be in every client contract to make sure that ownership of the work is transferred, once you've been paid, kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, and this is especially important as you say, for a lot of freelancers that are doing software, kind of algorithm work, code work, marketing, etc. Anything that you are designing, anything that you're doing. I remember what we talked last week, that intellectual property covers a very, very wide thing. It's not a luxury that we often think about, that it's only related to large corporations. We talked last week about an IP assignment agreement. So one thing to ensure that you have a clause in your agreements that reads something along the lines of all intellectual property rights transfer to the client only upon full and final payment.
Right.
That prevents your client, your customer, from owning or using the work before they've paid you in full. It's really a very, very vital clause to have in your contracts.
Okay, so remember that. In terms of paperwork, something's just occurred to me actually. Assuming you're appropriately licensed, you're up and running, you're in a position to bill for work you've done. When you're invoicing, is there a requirement to bill in English and Arabic, or is either one fine? Is there anything in the law about that?
No, there isn't really sort of a requirement to be doing dual billing or single billing because, I mean, realistically, if anything were to get to a dispute and you're before the local courts, which operate in Arabic, you would have to get all your documentation translated anyway. So there isn't really a requirement to have things, even your contracts or anything like that, to be dual languaged or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're starting to really get to grips with freelance life. Where do you start when it comes to, I guess I'm thinking about structuring for success, and when you begin to scale, what kinds of things do you need to think about then when, you're there, but you want to get up there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit like upscaling or upgrading. You don't necessarily have to go when you first set up to go full in, and it's a little bit like the difference of cars. You know, most cars will get you from point A to point B, but it depends on the type of car you get, right? So, depending on where you are in your business, you don't necessarily have to start off being there. So, in terms of scaling up, it's ensuring, I think, from day one, regardless of how small you are, to make sure that your corporate setup is correct, and that again begins with what type of business are you operating, what is your business plan, who are your customers, etc. And then getting your corporate setup, your documentation in order, um, and then depending on if you're scaling up, if you're getting clients in different places that you haven't accounted for, how do you structure for that? And then are you getting investors? Are you wanting to scale up? For example, you need to open up a physical office you've been operating out of your house. So these are the types of things that we start to think about, and how do we fit that into the model that you've already created. Hopefully you've already created it with a solid foundation, because if you start with a good foundation, even a smaller foundation, it's much easier to scale up.
It's interesting that because I kind of think I got into this habit early on of I keep stuff, and my wife thinks I hoard stuff, but I keep
Ah,
invoices and I keep track of things because I know in a year's time when I have to produce a set of accounts or account for myself in some way, I can always refer to it and think, even if I've just kept things in a folder, in a box file, I know I've got the receipt for this or the petrol that I paid for to get to this, all of that stuff. But I think that's a really important thing to think about. And it's more a mentality thing, Raymond, I think, in a lot of ways, that you're in the habit of keeping track. It's not really anything to do with the business or what you're doing, but it's just telling yourself, keep the receipt, just put it away, forget about it until you need it, but make sure you have it.
yeah, exactly.
You
And it
know?
goes back to the point that we were saying about your business deductibles, where you have those, they can be very, very useful. And with modern technology, between our phones, our tablets, our laptops, there are loads of different softwares and different apps that you can be able to literally. I mean, I can literally just scan a receipt and it's there, and it kind of bundles it together into making a one expense report. So you
Right.
can do these things. So it's gotten a lot simpler to be able to keep track of these things. And there are plenty of softwares out there to help you do that. But certainly record keeping, no matter how you do it, whether the
Yeah.
old-fashioned way or a fashion way, is absolutely vital.
Yeah, no, it is. I don't know. I register for a website and I make a note. I'm a sad, lonely man, but I know I will forget the password, and I keep a note of it somewhere until it's ingrained. It's a good discipline. The ability to work with mainland UAE clients is a common point of confusion. Like you kind of pointed to this, but let's just reiterate this: the difference between free zone and mainland. If I have a free zone a freelance license. What do I need to follow to legally engage with clients outside of my free zone?
Yeah, it's a very confusing point for a lot of people. Again, because of the UAE's kind of unique legal structure. So a free zone freelancer, that's a tongue twister. A free zone freelancer can work with mainland clients, but there are sort of strict compliance rules that they have to follow.
Right.
You have to invoice through the free zone entity that you've created, not in your personal capacity, obviously. Um, the activities that you are doing have to match the licensed activity.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you've been on your license that you have that is your business activity, that's the only activity that you can
Compliance once again.
and you cannot have a mainland office presence, a physical office presence, unless you obtain a separate mainland licensing.
Right.
That's the thing that you get. There are some um, sectors, not that many, but where a mainland client may require an NOC. The key rule here is that you can contract with mainland clients, but you cannot operate as a mainland company unless you're licensed to do so. So it gets kind of dicey. And again, this is one of those it depends questions. Really, again, before you start going, get some legal advice and ensure that what the important factor that I think any lawyer needs to understand first is what is the business that you are going to be operating in, because that will define where you incorporate, how you incorporate, what license you get. I know it gets really, really tricky, and it's often hard to explain to a lot of clients why they need to pay a few thousand dirhams, sometimes tens of thousands of dirhams, to have a corporate setup. I know it's not cheap because it can run up to something like 30, 40, sometimes 50,000 dirhams to get that legal advice, to have that corporate setup from a Clark Kent lookalike. However, paying that small bit at the outset can really save you down the line. I often like to think about it, having come from a family of mostly doctors. It's a bit like getting an annual checkup or preventative medicine,
Yeah.
right? Getting that small checkup, which is a lot of medical insurance recommends it because they know that if they get you into the doctor before you're actually sick, that they will be saving beforehand. So that's a really good way to think about it.
It's absolutely right. There's another way. A friend of mine years ago said to me, much wiser guy than me, said, "Look, insurance, total waste of money until you need it." And
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely,
it's
yeah.
very similar, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look, for a lot of people, going freelance is an opportunity to kind of branch out if you've worked for somebody for years. But we do have these non-compete clauses in contracts still. I don't know how legally binding they are, but if someone's left a full-time job in the UAE, how binding are these non-compete clauses?
Yeah, the topic of non-compete clauses in contracts, it's a very unique subject. It's one thing to understand is that they are a creature of contract, meaning there are sort of broad strokes that are provided to us by statute of what somebody can and cannot do.
Okay.
But mostly non-competes are a creature of contract, meaning that this is a huge it depends question. There are a lot of different variables because it literally depends on what your specific clause says. So this is a situation where, let's say that you're operating for a current employer, you're deciding to either have that side hustle while you're employed, or you're going off and setting up a freebie.
Right.
Generally speaking, what the broad strokes are to having a non-compete that is enforceable in the UAE, it needs to have some form of time limit. Generally speaking, just to back up a little bit, with non-competes, the law is trying to do a very, very fine balancing act between protecting a company's legitimate right to be able to hold on to its trade secrets, to its clients, etc., but also at the same time balancing that with an individual's ability to be able to continue working. So you can have non-competes, but they have to have some form of time limit. They can't be forever. Whether it's 6 months, 12 months, it all depends on a question of reasonableness.
Yeah.
They have to have some sort of reasonable geographic limit. It can't be that you can't be a software engineer in the entire world. It needs to be kind of because again, we're trying not to cut off somebody's livelihood.
Yeah.
And they have to be limited to a very specific business activity. Really, kind of a three simple no-nos is don't go after the exact same clients that the company has. Don't use the company's confidential information, and don't replicate proprietary methods and templates. You can compete fairly. Clients can come with you if they so choose, but you're not exactly kind of going for them at the same time. But it really does depend on the specific wording of that contract that you have.
The word that you use there, reasonableness,
Yeah.
is kind of outlines exactly how you should act. Hopefully, we can be reasonable with one another. Let's see. You need to be sure that you've licensed yourself appropriately, so it pays to do your research. You want to be sure of that. For the creator and influencer economy, is there not a need for dual licenses? So you would have like a business freelance license and an e-media license, for example. So who would need to have both of those? What activities, would you have to be involved with to cover that? And is there a penalty for posting paid content without, a structure like that?
Yeah, this is a fairly new regulatory requirement here in the UAE. Obviously, and it comes out of the concern of all the things that we've been hearing about social media and sort of issues related to it. So it really, it's quite wide, and there isn't a specific definition of what an influencer is, for example, but it's really any promotional or sponsored content. The person that is putting that out there needs to, number one, have a business or a freelance license to be able to earn revenue, and that could be non-monetary revenue.
Okay.
And then you also need a what's known as an e-media license from the National Media Council to be able to legally publish that paid content.
Okay.
So this would include everybody that is kind of an influencer, a content creator, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc. Even things like commercial photographers, for example, get kind of encompassed into this. Penalties can include significant fines. You can have your content removed. You can have suspension of existing licenses, and you can have issues with being able to renew your visa or your trade license. So this sector is becoming more regulated, and enforcement is being handed down.
Okay. We've got a question in. Just let me bring it up here for you. This is, let me see. Yeah, okay. Mary Ann texting, Clark Kent is in the house. Hello, Raymond. That wasn't the point. Hello, I see a lot of posts online advertising freelance visas. How legitimate are those posts online, the freelance visa advertising that this person sees?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like any other advertising, right? It's sort of a bit of a buyer beware. Obviously, there are very much legitimate sources, which is DED, mainland, or the relevant free zone.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, so just like what you did in contacting the DED, or you can contact the free zone itself. And obviously through lawyers. All lawyers in Dubai and law firms have to be registered and regulated by the Dubai Legal Affairs Department, the DLAD. So make sure that you are going with someone that is regulated and knows what they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mary Ann has kicked something off here because everybody wants advice from Clark Kent.
There we go.
named by you, not by me.
It was your viewers last week. That was the top comment apparently from last week, according to Michael.
Oh man, I love that. That's funny. From Keith,
Yeah.
I'm planning to work as a session artist for various studios and clients. Could you advise me on what type of license, permit, or legal structure I need to operate legally and protect myself in the UAE? Additionally, are there any specific contracts or agreements I should have in place when providing the session work that I want to provide?
I think it sounds like Keith should come in for a consultation.
I'm thinking
honest.
Keith needs to pay you for advice like that.
Well, I mean, again, what I would say to Keith is, again, it depends, because he's laid out really well in terms of what he wants to do as a business. But what we also need to understand within the UAE is who are his clients, who are his customers, where is he going to be operating? Is he going to have a physical studio, for example? It's always an initial question generates more questions than answers, which is why, again, a bit like going for your annual checkup, it's not just, hi, I feel okay, and the doctor says, okay, great. We need to do a bit more of an examination, some diagnostics, some lab work, and then we can give you an actual result.
I like the medical analogies that you're using this morning. But Keith, so a lot more research needed, or book a session with a particular legal practitioner. I know one. I
hear he's very good.
Well, apparently, I often do work for international clients outside the UAE. Does UAE law still apply to me, especially when it comes to contracts and getting paid?
Yeah, that's a big one, right? So you get a lot of people that think, well, I'm just living here. I might be sponsored by a spouse, or I've got a golden visa.
Yep.
And I'm not doing any Dubai related work or UAE related work. All of my clients are outside. I'm operating from a Starbucks on my laptop. I can just sort of wing it. And that is a big no-no. You are.
Is it really?
Yeah.
You just can't do that.
It's a really big no-no. Number one, from a regulatory reasons, because you're still here, you're still operating, you're still doing business, and also realistically, it's also not that advantageous for you, because what I would often say is the UAE has a pretty good legal system for you to bind your customers, even if they are outside of the UAE.
Okay.
To bind them into, for example, UAE jurisdiction when it comes to arbitration, for example, or small claims. So again, I would say it's a no-no from a regulatory purpose, and you can also manage it, and it's also much more tax advantageous to be out here anyways, in a corporate setup. So both legally and for your own pocketbook, I think it's better to be properly set up.
Okay, don't do it. I mean, you can't freelance on a tourist visa, can you? For example, no,
100%, yeah.
Absolutely not. Okay, anonymous. Final question from somebody viewing or maybe listening. I feel stupid for asking this. Don't. No question is too daft.
No.
I do it every day, but I do quick, small jobs. This person says, so I don't use formal contracts, just an email agreement. I don't know how this person is licensed, but this is the question. If my clients don't pay, do the email agreements count as a legal contract in the UAE, or am I out of luck?
It's not a stupid question at all, because I literally get it at least a handful of times a week.
Right.
I often find that non-lawyers take one of two very polar views on what a contract is. They either think that it needs to be sort of printed on embroiled paper and it, signed using a feather fountain pen, and wax inked and all that.
Yeah.
Or you get the ones that send me a screenshot of a WhatsApp where one person gives a thumbs up emoji and another one gives a clapping emoji. It's what I would say is the answer is really. This is where, I'm sorry for kind of taking a bit longer, but it's really a question of the difference between theoretical law and practical law.
Right.
Okay? The theoretical is technically you can have verbal contracts. You can have what we call as course of dealings. So if you've been dealing with the same customer over and over similar jobs, you can show that as proof.
If you've provided a service and they've indicated
Correct,
intent to
right.
pay, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
you can show things like exchanges of emails, exchanges of WhatsApp. So all these things go in to form a contract, because a contract is really just a meeting of the minds. It is an offer, an acceptance, and really that's what forms a contract. That is the theory, right? That's what we all walk out of our first year of law school learning, and that's what a lot of people learn. What I would say is, and that is correct, but what I would say is the practical element of it is the problem of what happens when somebody doesn't pay you, right? And all you're going by is a long chain of emails. You're going in front of a court, a judge who's seeing hundreds of other cases at the same time, and you're asking that judge or that tribunal or whoever it is that you've got in your seat to analyze and interpret exchanges of emails for a business that they may not be aware of. How's that going to work, etc. Whereas you go in having had a proper contract, proper invoicing scheme. In your contract, you've chosen your dispute mechanism of choice. So, for example, you've chosen DIFC, you've chosen arbitration, you've chosen something that you want. And then you can evidence that by a clear invoice, by a clear debt note, and you can go in for much faster enforcement. So in DIFC and ADGM, you have what's known as summary judgment. In local courts, you can go straight to execution if it's very, very clear, rather than spending that time and that money going through all stages of courts, fighting it out, having an expert appointed, etc. So, when we get a dispute that is only evidenced by exchanges of emails and etc., it's usually, unfortunately, that unless you're looking at somewhere between 1 to 2 million dirhams outstanding, it's not worth your time.
Okay, with you. So there you go, and on. If you're looking at a couple of million dirhams, then pursue that.
Otherwise, you're really just going to have to write it off. And I don't know a lot of freelancers that can write off 1 million dirhams.
No, that's unfortunately the case. I wanted to ask you about your side hustle as well, but there's one thing. Let me ask you this just very briefly, if you can.
Yeah.
Single biggest mistake. If you could stop every freelancer, every new freelancer in particular, from making just one legal mistake, what would the mistake be that you would want to counter?
The biggest one is, and I think that we kind of touched on it a number of times, is really treating freelancing, side hustle, whatever you want to call it, as a hobby instead of a real business. Right. Treat it like a business, even if you are just a laptop in a Starbucks, and that's what it is. If you are earning money, if you are doing a job, treat it like a business. That goes to your setup, your contracts, your taxes, your visa, your IP, your payment collection, everything like that. Do it correctly from day one. The problems that we see is not having proper contracts, issuing invoices without having a license, or even worse, I don't have a license, so I'm going to treat everything in cash, ignoring corporate tax, handing over IP, etc. So structure your freelance as a business professionally from the start. And if you do so, the UAE is a really great place to do it in.
And the other way is, if you do that, there's also the confidence boost you get from that. Because you're taking it more seriously, it becomes something. It becomes proper, doesn't it? And I guess that's what you're doing. We've literally got a minute left, Raymond, unfortunately. But you're about to become a freelancer in parallel to your legal practice as well. You've just done, what is it? Your personal training, endurance coaching.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on it a bit last week with sort of my endurance background, and I kind of touched on it in the sense that I've only really been doing it for the past 5 years, where I've started doing marathons, ultra marathons, triathlons, etc. It's really something that I'm quite passionate about it, and my quote unquote freelancing journey didn't really start with a business idea myself. It began as a hobby, but it kind of started with a bit of a wake up. About 5 years ago, a close colleague of mine passed away, And not long after that, my own health markers weren't great. I was a typical white-collar lawyer, overweight, high blood pressure, cholesterol, etc. And I realized I was living the white-collar lifestyle of long hours, high stress, very little movement, and that combination made me take fitness and health more seriously for myself. But I didn't really know what I was doing. So I went from really barely running to doing marathons and ultras and all these things, and getting into the best shape of my life at 42 almost. So I know firsthand how profoundly training and nutrition kind of improved my own health, my productivity, my focus overall. And so that's led me to become a certified trainer, endurance coach, nutritionist. And my ultimate goal is to really work with professionals like myself, whether they're lawyers or white collar or finance, business, etc. People who are in high pressure roles, who want a bit of a roadmap to build real, sustainable, healthy habits. We do a really great job in November of doing kind of the 30 by 30, but it's what happens after that, and getting into a bit more of a consistency. It doesn't have to be training for a marathon or training for something big, but just becoming a healthier you.
I think there's a business in that. You're walking the walk and talking the talk.
Hey,
you're literally a living, breathing Superman who comes to visit us, according to people that watch you. Look, I've really enjoyed talking to you, always do.
Yeah.
Raymond Kisswany is a partner at Davidson & Co. Law firm, about to go on his freelance journey. You've got a stand-up desk at work, haven't you?
I do, with a walking treadmill.
You're walking treadmill as well, so he means it. Great to talk to you. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. This is Mira Business FM.